Hi everybody, welcome to my studio here in County Carlow, and today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful platter from native Irish beech. Now this piece of wood came from one section of this massive chunk here beside me. It measures almost 60 inches across at the widest point, and it's a special tree because it came from my old school grounds. So about a year ago I got a call to say that this magnificent tree fell in a storm, and would I be interested in having a look at it. So I went in straight away, and the tree just looked superb. I made one cut with the chainsaw in from the end to see that there was no decay in the wood itself. So follow me into the workshop and I'll show you how to make this wonderful heirloom piece. The piece of wood that I'm working with today is a piece of flamed Irish beech. Now beech in Ireland is really quite prized for its beautiful colour. It's very easy to work with and it's predictable when drying if you dry it carefully, in that it normally doesn't crack or doesn't present too many surprises. So for me it's always been perfect for making salad bowls and platters. I know once I put the piece into the kiln, 8 weeks later, it comes out normally without defects and dry at about, I suppose, 10%. That's what I want to get it to. So the piece I have here actually has a few little defects in it, and I chose this on purpose. So if you look at that, it's got a small little crack there, and that's not a drying defect. That defect was there before it went into the kiln, but it did open up a little bit, and this small little crack was exposed. Let me just focus there for a second. Was exposed as it dried out, but I really want to show you how I fill those carefully so that they still look good and the piece will remain stable over time during use, and the glue or the glue I used to repair it doesn't fall out. Now on the other side we've got another similar defect, possibly part of the same one. This one here is a little bit more concerning if you look at that. So that's quite large here, but actually a lot of that will turn away, and that's going to be the rim up here on top. So if we look at this for a second, just up on top, you can see that it's warped a little bit on the top plane, but not too much. And when I rough shaped this, it was about 25% moisture content. After coming out of the kiln now, it's down to about 10%. Which is perfect for finishing it off. So I'm going to switch over for a second to my whiteboard just over here, and I started off with a piece that was unseasoned, about 3 inches thick, 16 inches across, and I rough shaped it, leaving the wall thickness roughly about 1.25 inches all the way across. The tenon size on it was quite large, 4.5 inches roughly for the tenon size, and then the base about 6 inches across, and that left me with enough wood to dry out so that the final piece will be roughly about 2.5 inch in thickness by the time I take the tenon off and get rid of some of the warping up here on top. Now if I switch over to this other sheet here, I'll show you where the board came from that gave me that platter blank. So quite often, because I have a sawmill now, I'll split the log into quarters, and I normally will take a platter blank from here and then get another platter blank there, and the platters get smaller as I work out towards the bark, but I intentionally cut up the log so each piece has the grain running at 90 degrees to the face of the plank. Now to make a 16-inch platter with this quarter saw material requires a very large log. So if you take 2 of those, or 32 inches, and then you want about 4 inches there in the center to eliminate the crack, that's a huge log. Remember that you don't have to twice turn a platter. You can go out and buy a piece of material that's 2 inches, 2.25 inch thick by 16, and work straight through without going through that rough shaping and drying process. But for me, it's much cheaper to buy the wood when it's unseasoned. I can do the work myself, and I also get a chance to cut the log exactly the way I want to cut it up. So to put this on the lathe, I have this plate here. This is my bowl reversing plate, And that allows me to put the warped surface up there. If you can see that for a second, let me just go overhead and we'll just slide the camera along. So you can see the way that's rocking, and the point of that bowl reversing plate with the rubber on both faces. And we'll just have a look there for a second. If you want to see how I made that, we have another video. It's both available on YouTube and it's also on our videos online as well, on our subscription channel. So that allows me to put the plate on and find a point where it sits flat. So that's almost there. And if I take that for a second, that's not rocking at all. And now what I'm going to do is just use my two hands to center it and then bring the tailstock in slowly to just support it. So I'm just going to ease off for a second here and center the side grain using my hands. That's pretty good. Bring in the tailstock, point a little bit there. So you can see that the point just barely kisses the wood, but not the ring just surrounding it has not reached the wood yet. So I just want it to barely touch so it doesn't leave a deep hole in it just yet until I'm ready to apply pressure. So the next thing I'm going to do is just bring the tool rest in here a little bit. And this is the end grain section here, the widest point. And all I'm going to do is just check and see that I have the same distance on both sides. So it's touching here. It's almost touching here. It's so little that I'm just going to tighten it up and just go with it. So we'll just lock it there from the front. Pull the tool rest just back a little bit. And next thing, just crank that tailstock up. And as I'm doing that, you'll see the center being driven into the wood. Now it's resting on the ring. And I normally get my two hands onto the hand wheel and just give it an extra tighten there. Now what I do feel is the tailstock slipping back a little bit, so I apply a little bit more pressure down below, and that's working much better now. That's good and tight. We'll lock that into place. Tool rest is not touching, and I'm just going to check that the speed is down low to start with. So I'll bring the speed up slowly until I'm happy with it. So first thing I'm going to look at here, let's go above for a second, and you can see that's the defect I was speaking about earlier on. Now when I'm cleaning up this edge to get it running through, I need to be careful not to lose any material here off the rim. So what I'm going to do is make a cut in that direction so that I don't chip out anything there on top. Next thing I'll do is clean up the face there and then reduce the size of the tenon after that. Okay, let's give it a go. So the first tool that I'm going to work with today is the GL4, the 5/8 inch bowl gouge. And it's sharpened to 55 degrees, and that's the perfect tool to just throw this up and get it around 5/8. I'm just referring to the outside diameter there. And I'm going to just square up that tool rest, and off we go. The vacuum chuck really requires three components to work. So the first of all, I suppose, is the vacuum pump. The one that I have here is 1 horsepower, which is a little bit more than what you need. And I think 3/4 horsepower should work quite well. This here is called the rotary adapter, so that allows you to connect your stationary hose from the vacuum pump right up to the lathe. And this adapter is made specifically for the Vicmark lathe. So on the end here, there's an M16 thread which will screw into the hand wheel, and it can be left on the lathe all the time. I've modified this so it's a little different to how Vicmark ship it, and all I've done was added a hole and then a new thread here on the end, and I now can use that. It's called the T-ported valve there to release the bowl or to get the vacuum to suck it onto the lathe. And then that allows me then to put the gauge up here on top where it was to originally connect this fitting to it. So having the gauge close by and within sight, it just adds that sense of security there for me. So I always know I have the vacuum required to hold it on. And I'm normally working about -20 to -25 inches of mercury, and it does work very, very well. There's one other part that you will need, and that is a drum chuck. So here on the lathe is one made by a company called Airpress, and they are in the United Kingdom. These come in 3 different sizes. So this is the biggest one, it's 8 inch. They've got a 5 inch and a 3 inch. So I use the 2 larger sizes to do most of the bowls here in my workshop. It's a very efficient way of taking the tenon off the bowl at the very, very end. Very secure, provided you don't go through the bottom. So the last thing I have to do before I put everything in place is screw that in there from the end. It's a right-hand thread, so it could potentially unscrew when the lathe is running. So all I'm going to do there is use the wrench to tighten that up, so that's not going to happen. So let's put everything in there. So all I can do there is I can put the center of the lathe, bring it in there until it touches the piece, and I'm just going to quickly switch on the vacuum pump, draw away the tailstock, and we're ready to go. And I think this will find a very good home. The pyrography unit that I use is made by Peter Child in England, and it's sold by a company called Craft Supplies, but it's not Craft Supplies USA, completely separate. It's Craft Supplies UK. And then the pen on top is just a simple folded wire. Can we get that to focus? There we go. It's just a simple folded wire. I bend it with the pliers, and then I have to just be careful about how much pressure that I apply. But I've worked with these types of units from the very beginning of my production, and I really like how they work. So I'm just going to turn this over now, heat up the pen, and I'll try and give you the best view of that happening. Okay, so one of the most important things when I'm signing a bowl or platter is that I write parallel to the grain. So I treat the grain almost as lines on a page. Occasionally I'll see people write at an angle across those lines, and it's very hard for me to sleep at night when I see that happening. So I normally just write my name, obviously. The wood, which is beech. The country, which is Ireland. And the year. So that is the finished piece. If I turn it over there, you can see the signature on it.